So, apparently, Calcio is back. 4 league titles in the same time. That's more than any other league in top 5 Europe. Best players in the world choosing to play in Serie A. And total dominance in continental competition, including 2 Champions League semi-finalists and a guaranteed finalist. Oh yeah, Serie A is back. Pause. I just don't believe it. You're telling me that this league, with deteriorating stadiums, with historic teams that can't even afford to hold on to their best players for more than a season, the same teams that have financial situations less stable than my bank account, is supposed to be the best league in the world, that Calcio is back. Look, we all want Serie A to be great again. I mean, we're all sick of watching the Premier League buy the best young players before they turn old enough to buy a drink in America. We're sick of Real Madrid winning the Champions League every season. I mean, God forbid Manchester City finally do it and win the Champions League. They'll have the record for having the smallest amount of people at a parade after winning the treble. But with Italian football, what you see on the pitch is only half the story. Yes, Serie A might be the most competitive league in the world in recent history. We won't talk about what Juventus did to that league. More competitive than any other league in top 5 Europe. I mean, wake me up when someone other than Manchester City actually wins the Premier League. No, a real league title, not behind closed doors. I'm kidding. Calm down. It's a joke. Relax. But with Calcio, let's be real. It's only competitive because Juventus fell off and the quality is so poor. You're telling me that this AC Milan team will be remembered in history as a great league-winning side that will be eternal in our minds? No, it was a fluke. You only won it because no one else was good enough to compete with you at a respectable level. But Nos, Conte won the league a season before with Inter, and that was a really good Inter side. It was elite, eternal, but how long did it last? And that's the problem. How long do these good teams last? As soon as Inter managed to assemble the best players with the best coach, they were picked out immediately. 1 season of dominance and that's it. The best players ended up going to richer teams. And Conte quit on them because, well, he wanted them to spend more money, not sell off everyone because they couldn't afford to keep them with all those wages. Even after winning the league. On the pitch, Inter were incredible. We'll never forget that team with your Hakimis, the Lautaro, Lukaku combination, Perisic and Barella, but half those players I've mentioned are gone. They couldn't hold on to them because they couldn't afford them. Because off the pitch, Inter are not doing so well. They're in a ridiculous amount of debt and had to refinance on it not so long ago. They're so desperate to make it into the Champions League next season by either winning the Champions League this season or somehow making top 4. Because if they don't make the Champions League next season, Inter could disappear for the next 5 years. Is Calcio really back when you don't have one of your biggest teams? And it's not just them. AC Milan can't build a proper team, not the fluke you saw last season. They've had to be financially conservative for the last few years because they were nearly bankrupt in 2018. I mean, let's not even talk about Juventus. They're so financially fucked that their whole board had to resign. I mean, how can you claim that Calcio is supposed to be back when 3 of your biggest sides are this close to being totally irrelevant? But it's not all doom and gloom for Italian football. If you can't rely on the 3 biggest sides to bring Calcio back, then look just below that. Because Lazio are fighting for second and have all but guaranteed Champions League football. Roma could win their 2nd European Cup in a row under Jose Mourinho. And of course, Napoli have had the most beautiful story in football this season. Most beautiful story in club football this season. Because unlike some teams, they don't bottle unsurmountable leads. Yep, these are the teams. These guys are going to be the reason why Calcio is back. Really. See, the problem with these clubs is, I'm sorry to say, they're not big enough. What they're doing is incredible, don't get me wrong, but they can't sustain this. Their resources are going to be taken away from them after 1 or 2 seasons. They simply can't afford to hold on to this. I mean, Jose Mourinho is already being quoted for PSG or whatever. Kabachi Kvaratskhelia or Victor Osimhen, one of them is definitely leaving at the end of the season, if not both. And Maurizio Sarri has done it again. I guarantee you, one other big club is looking at him. The unfortunate thing about these clubs is that whenever they find an incredible player for a very small amount of money, and that player ends up having an incredible season, even if that player loves that club, he's gonna start expecting, well, a lot of incredible seasons. And also incredible amounts of money. And if you can't sustain these incredible performances as a team, nor pay these players this incredible wages, then they end up leaving. It's a vicious cycle that limits these teams to only a few wonderful seasons. No matter how good you are, you can't unearth a Cavacci again for 2 seasons in a row. Calcio, sadly, can't claim to be back if you're relying on these teams. Bandos, the Champions League. The only silver lining in Calcio possibly being back, or being back some point in the future, is their performances in Europe this season. Because let's admit it, they are all really lucky to be in this position this season. Particularly in the Champions League because, well, they only had to play against teams like an out-of-sorts Frankfurt, a Benfica who've been pillaged of their best player by the London Cowboys, and literally the worst team that the Premier League has to offer. This won't happen again next season. But if the main reason for Calcio being back, or not being back, is financial, and shitty stadiums, and low attendances and corruption, but mostly financial, then going deep into the Champions League will go a long way into saving them. If we look at it financially, just raw numbers, one good Champions League run into the final for an Italian team is essentially worth 2 Serie A seasons. Their brand exposure will definitely be helped from this, not just the TV revenue, because even though I've told you it's a lie, everyone who doesn't watch this video still believes that Calcio is back, and come the weekend, they'll be turning their attention from Barcelona versus Real Madrid to Salernitana versus Udinese. Calcio might not be back, but they're in the right direction. Yes, the league might only be competitive thanks to Juventus falling off of a cliff, but they all did go up a level. There has been an increase in quality from everyone else, to be honest. They've kind of met in the middle. No, they're not at a Premier League level, but at least one team isn't winning it every season. And teams like Lazio, Roma, Napoli put emphasis on how competitive the league is and how they are not reliant on one big team to bring in all their revenue, like La Liga. Whilst the performances in Europe will go a long way into alleviating the financial burden that most teams find themselves, which will go a long way into refurbishing stadiums, training facilities, offering competitive wages, and holding on to players a little bit longer before oil money comes in and takes them. So, no, Calcio isn't back. It's just a lucky season, but they're headed in the right direction. Well, everyone except for Juventus.